This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, real MVPs, Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
I just change it up. I point once at you, once at them, and then back at you for the third one. But welcome in to the Primetime Podcast here on MVP, Most Valuable Podcast. And this is where we talk about college football, college basketball. I'm not going to do what I did in our first take, Brandon. Not going to ask you about all the other college sports. I know the answer. No, we're just going to look at college football. We're just going to look at college basketball. But today we've got a jam-packed show for you guys. Going to have Matt on the line, one of our just very, I wanted to say valued patrons, but that's not the right word. Our loving patron. The patrons, we can't do what we do each and every day without their support. Going to have him on to talk about Big Ten basketball. We're also going to be talking about Duke basketball, a little draft stock for the Big Three, a little Tre Jones, how that's going to play in, and then I got a special Zion question for Brandon coming out of the mouth of Scottie Pippen. Don't worry, Brandon, it's a very easy question.
Good, because you usually throw like a lot of type of questions at me that will take a lot of time. No. It's not just a quick boom type of answer. This
question will be very easy and might just be a yes or no answer with how easy it is. And then we will end the show taking a look at Romeo Langford's draft stock. Are we too low on him? Because some of the commenters are saying that in mocks and big boards that we're a little bit low on Romeo Langford. So we're going to take a look at the Indiana Star today. But before we do, I'm going to throw out that Patreon segment. Make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. If you want to be like Matt, go ahead and sign up. Patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. But Brandon, let's start with our first topic. And we're going to look at the Duke Blue Devils. And this is a topic, I will be completely honest, I didn't know where to start with it. So the kind of meat and potatoes of this is Tre Jones. In the game against Syracuse, which Duke did lose, Tre Jones went out of the game after 6 minutes with an AC joint injury in his shoulder. That injury kept him out of the Virginia game, where Duke barely escaped the Virginia Cavaliers, gave Virginia their first loss of the year, winning 72-70. I'm going to let you kind of decide where this discussion stands, because when it comes to Tre Jones' injury, we can talk about how it affects the team, but Coach K, I keep trying to say his last name, I should just say Coach K. Coach K came out and said it's not going to be a long injury. He's not going to be out for a month or anything. He's like, I don't know if it'll be this game, being the Virginia game, or the next game, but he will be back sooner rather than later. I'm going to let you start. Where do you want to start this discussion when it comes to Duke and Tre Jones and the Duke Three?
Tre Jones.
Okay, go ahead. Did I say Tre Jones?
Yeah.
Tre Jones. Tre Jones and the Duke Three. I always throw his brother in there, and his brother is in the NBA.
I'm gonna start it with Tre Jones because of the fact that this is something when we talked about a while back, months ago now, and we were saying, will the Duke Blue Devils go undefeated? I said no, you said yes. I said no because while, yes, this is a very good Duke team, I still think even though they're not ranked at number one, they are the number one team in the country when they have their pieces in place. Now, one of those pieces is out, Tre Jones. Again, we don't know how long that is, what separated shoulder, sprained shoulder, something.
The AC joint.
Something with the shoulder there, but the number one thing right now with him and with him being gone is you do not have a true point guard out on the floor. You do not have your number one point guard, the guy who your offense runs through, out on the floor. That's number one. So the guy who has the most confidence in bringing up the ball and moving the ball around and really controlling the offense, he's not on the floor. Number two, you have lost possibly your best defender as well. Just and stats show that in the Syracuse game, which Duke did lose last week, Syracuse had 6 points, 5 turnovers, and 12 possessions before Tre Jones left. It had 89 points and 10 turnovers in 77 possessions when he wasn't on the floor. Now, that's a small sample size, but still it's a pretty accurate sample size of the way that he plays defense when he's out there on the floor. He causes some chaos defensively. And makes the other team struggle. When he's not there, I'm not saying that Duke does not play any defense, but I'm saying that they go down a level. They go down a rung on the ladder in terms of defense when Tre Jones isn't in the ball game. He brings an added energy, pressure, all the words you want to use to describe a good defensive player, he's got that. The Virginia game was very close. They still won. Mm-hmm. They're lucky that they were able to still win. They ended up losing that game against Syracuse. Going to be a tough game. Syracuse's you talk about defense. Syracuse has a very, very difficult defense. And what Duke tried to do is they tried to shoot the three, especially when Tre Jones was gone. Three. I think they went 9 of 43 from three. They weren't good. They weren't good. And a lot of those things, when it comes down to something like that, Zion, you and I were doing the podcast last week, and I'm like, Zion's got 25. Zion's got 30. Mm-hmm. We were leaving. I go, Zion probably ended with 40. Yeah. He didn't, but Zion may not have that game every night. Even with that game, they didn't win. Mm-hmm. That then,
well, I mean, look at the Virginia game.
I was just going to say that kind of then goes into the. So I kind of took it from Tre Jones to the big three, but I'll now kind of hand it over to you for your thoughts on that. But I think with Tre Jones gone for however long he is gone, it's a big loss for them because he's not the scorer. We know that. They know that. But he is the one who helps to lead and give and feed the ball to the scorers, and he is a huge presence on the defensive side.
And the one thing I will throw out there is, I meant the Florida State game, not the Virginia game. Zion had a ridiculous game against Virginia, but Florida State, the one where it needed a Cam Reddish 3 basically at the buzzer to win that game, you had Zion only with 11 points. And yes, Tyus Jones did play that game. Zion Tre played that game, played 40. Zion also
hasn't played for Duke in a little bit.
Yeah, he hasn't played for a little bit, but I'm still going to call him Tyus, and you're going to have to correct me every time. But Tre Jones played 40 in that game. Zion did leave that game early too, because I believe that was a game he got poked in the eye. He only played 11 minutes. Why he wasn't even in the game towards the end. Maybe that's also why Ricky only had 11 points in that game. The thing I look at is, and this is kind of on both sides, you can do this for the rest of the season for Duke, but also the big three in their draft stock is, I wonder, and this might be a small sample size that we get this, does Tyus Jones help the draft stock of RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish? And the reason why I say that is, Zion, to me, his stock is solidified. I'm going to ask you a question about that later on. Like, he's solidified. Number one pick in the draft. There is nobody.
Because we know everything that he can do.
And he is so, like, the things that he was doing against Virginia are, like, the same things I've seen at the beginning of the year. Every time he does it, though, I go, holy shit, and I show Dave. Or holy crap, and I show whoever I'm with. He is a human highlight reel every single game that he is in. Like, I showed you the one clip from the Virginia game where he cocks back the dunk. Virginia kid comes in to even foul him, makes contact with the arm, and that's not even enough. Zion still powers through it for the dunk to go to the line for the and one. The thing that I think with Tyus Jones, you're exactly correct. I would describe it as he's the glue to the big three. Because not just you hit on the defensive side, with me offensively, he's a true point guard, like you said. And with a true point guard, he's going to dish out the assists and make sure the ball needs to go to where it needs to go to, especially when they're in the half court. Like, that's the thing about Duke. When they're in the full court, like the up-tempo transition game, then you don't need Tre out there. All you need is Zion running it, RJ running it, Cam running it, whoever gets the rebound and goes with it. Usually it's going to be Zion or RJ. But when you get stuck in the half court and need to actually call a play or two, that's where Tre Jones becomes so vital, because he can then, like, I'm not saying he's the number one, but he can be the guy to say, hey, I can fit in here where you need to. Okay, RJ, you're not going to run this play. This is one that's going to start with me and can get the ball where it needs to go and kind of help these three Dukies, the Reddish, Barrett, and Williamson, all kind of coexist together.
Speaking of Reddish, how poorly has he played lately? I mean, I know he wasn't in the game against Syracuse, but what a liability he's been on the floor scoring-wise. He's been crap. He's been garbage. It's been really pathetic. I mean, you look, and this just goes to show in terms of stats.
Except for his game against Florida State.
From December 5th, to January 8th, he went 2 of 12, 4 of 12, 3 of 11, 1 of 7, 1 of 8, 4 of 9. Get off the floor. Get off the floor. Yes, you played well against Florida State. Good. You needed to. That's why you won. But, I mean, what a liability. You show up like that in the tournament. Great season. We only lost 4 games, but we lost our first one here today because he went 1 of 11. And you're a one-and-done player, and you're going to the draft, and you did nothing at Duke. Basically, you did nothing. Great, wonderful season. You're going to still get drafted top 10, top whatever, but you didn't do it. I mean, the inconsistency that he has had lately is really, really poor. And I hate to call him out because I truly think he's a great player. I do. But he has been awful. Outside of Florida State, he's been awful the last 7 games.
Well, and the thing with Cam Reddish that
Even Virginia. He struggled mightily.
The Virginia game, okay, here's what I'm going to say with the Virginia game, and I might give him a pass for Virginia.
If there's any game that you're going to give a pass, yeah, it would be
because,
Virginia.
like, I look at the Virginia game, and even coming in, like, my thought was, even just by looking at the box score, my first thought was, oh, DeAndre Hunter was probably on him heavily. And DeAndre Hunter, one of the biggest things we talk about, whether it's big board mock draft, is his defensive skill and how good he is defensively. And I know that Cam Reddish didn't play against Syracuse, but I'm going to pull them into it as well. The thing that is unique about both of these games for all the Dukies is that they just played the 2 best defensive teams that they were going to play this year. And guess what? They get them again. And guess what? They could get one,
get them again.
Maybe both.
They could definitely get Virginia 2 more times.
Yeah, they could get Virginia 2 more times. They could even get Syracuse 2 more times, depending on how the bracket falls out. Hell, they might get these teams 4 more times. One of them, because if Virginia goes far with Duke, could meet in the national tournament. And if Syracuse gets into the tournament and they're kind of like a mid-team like they usually are, they could progress through a region and, depending on where they're placed, could meet Duke again. So there's even a possibility they meet one of these teams 4 times this year. With Cam Reddish, the thing that I think about it is you've got, out of the 3 Dukies, Zion's the top. There's little things that you can nitpick from Zion in college. Like, there are a lot of people that are just like, everything that he needs to work on is a next level problem. It's not a college problem. With RJ, the thing that I see from him is very much, I'm going to say, kind of like the Russell Westbrook syndrome of like, I don't want to say the word chucker, but I'm going to say the word chucker. Like, you look at it just game by game. The Florida State game, RJ went 10 of 19. The absolute next game where Cam Reddish was not out there, 8 of 30 for RJ. Like chucking up shots where it's like, get to 30. Yeah, he finished with 23 in that game, but that's because 4 of his 8 shots were 3-pointers in that Syracuse game. But he shot 80 and he only made 10 of them. And then Virginia, 11 of 19, a lot better, went to the line. Him and Zion feasted at the line, although Zion, I wish your 50% from the line was a little bit better. Maybe would have cracked 50% from the line at that point. The thing is, I feel like as the season goes on, Cam Reddish and RJ, we're just going to nitpick them. Is that going to affect where they go? No. These three will probably be all top 4. They'll all be top 5 picks in the NBA draft. But with Cam Reddish, the thing that I see from him is his scoring is there. Like when he's on, he has a shot. He can shoot from 3. The thing I look at, though, is besides defense, what else is going to make him stand out from the other two or even John Morant? Because he's now in the conversation. If we're talking top 4, RJ and Zion are better rebounders. Both of them have better assist numbers. It's what is going to make you stand out compared to the other two, because right now in his really good games, it's just his shooting and that he can shoot from an NBA 3 or a projected NBA 3 very well. Because like if I look at his assist numbers, and yet again, this is how he fits into that system, 1-3, 1-1, 0-1-3. His highest has been 4, and that was the Hartford game. You look at rebounds, he had the most rebounds against Virginia with 8, but even before that, 3-2, 0-3,
the most
3-3.
rebounds he had before that was 5 against Auburn, and
7.
then before that it was Army.
Yep, 7
in game 2. But that's my problem here. That's my problem here, and that's where scouts are gonna say, "What have you done for me lately?" type of thing. And what have you done for your team lately? Which is why a John Morant might be able to move up ahead of him, because again, I know, and we'll get it a lot from our viewers. Yeah, scoring's great.
Yeah,
but what else has he done? And that's why hold on just a second. Is that scoring is great? Yes. And that's what a lot of us look at, because that's where most people have the most impact. But like you've mentioned, the rebounds, 8 rebounds, that's not a lot. That's not a lot. The other things that I look at are steals, blocks, assists, obviously. Only 4 assists. Most assists in one game is 4. Most steals in a game, he had 4 back-to-back, Hartford and Yale. Well, I mean, you and I could have steals against Hartford and Yale.
But then talk for yourself, Brandon. I'm not a big defensive guy. I in my old age, my old almost 30 age, sit me in the corner. I'm here, Kobe. Pass me the rock. I'll shoot the 3.
Okay, yeah. I guess I'm a little bit more active and mobile than you are. But he's killing you on the floor because he can't shoot. I mean, I'm not saying that he did in Virginia, rather against Virginia at home. I'm not saying that he did at Florida State. He had 23 there. But it's the games, and certainly the games coming up are not going to be difficult. If you look at the games coming up for Duke, you're going to be playing 2 of the worst teams in the ACC.
Pitt and Georgia Tech.
Some of the worst offensive teams. That is not, you shouldn't be getting hurt by them.
Followed by a Monday night game at Notre Dame, which we have, and this is Dave, Sean, and I have played around with the idea of going to that game, and probably won't. Then St. John's, who's played better, and then Boston College before you get Virginia again. So
what I'm saying is that he might be able to pull this, go 3 for 11 and have 9 points against a team like that. But when you get back to the Virginias, when you get back to the Syracuses, when you get back to the teams in the conference that are actually worth a dime, I think that's where you can't be inconsistent. You can't be pulling that type of stuff. And you also, if you're going to, you better get 10-plus rebounds. You better have some assists. You better have some steals, play some defense. That's what I'm saying, is that I'm not even talking necessarily just for him. I'm talking that if he continues on that inconsistent type pace, like I mentioned already, the John Morants are going to jump in front of him. Guys below him right now are going to jump over him, and he is going to fall, and he is going to fall, and he is going to fall. And I'm not talking like out of the top 10, but out of the top 5 could definitely be a realistic possibility if he continues on what has been a very inconsistent December and January.
Now, I've got 2 things I want to ask you. The first one I want to go into a little bit is with Cam, the thing that you'll notice if you look at his numbers, Virginia, 6 of his 12 shots were from 3. He went 1 of 6. Florida State, 8 of his 15 were from 3. He went 5 of 8. Against Wake Forest, 7 of his 9 were from 3. He went 2 of 7 from 3. 0 of 4 from 3. Half of his shots against Clemson were from 3. The point I'm getting to is if you look at his numbers, most of them are coming from 3.
They are.
And the thing that I wonder, and this is me going into the mind of an NBA scout, is one of the things we have said, and even as I look at Tankathon right now, when they have stat strengths and stat weaknesses, projected NBA 3 is on the stat strength and has 2+ marks. Steals is at 4, so that's like his biggest thing. Like, yes, he brings defense to the table, and that's what I think. If he didn't have that defensive part, he's not in the top 5. He might not be even in the top 10. He'd be in the top 10 at the most, but if he didn't have that defensive ability, Cam Reddish is nowhere near the top 5 for me right now. The thing I wonder with NBA teams is when they look at his film, when they look at him play, are they going to look at it and say 2 things and kind of give him the benefit of the doubt for this? The first one is going to be, well, most of his shots are from 3. We can work on that with him.
But he's not even been effective there.
And the second one, will they be saying, hey, the reason why he is so inconsistent is because of the Duke system, is because of playing next to RJ and Zion. They're like, Coach K is doing what he can, because Dave always brings up this point. College coaches, their MO, unless you're John Calipari, is to win basketball games. John Calipari is the only one that has made his MO. You come here, I'll get you drafted in the NBA. Every other coach, it's I'm here to win basketball games, because that's why the school has employed me as their head basketball coach. Will scouts look at Cam and go, I see the foundations there of a shot. I don't have to fix your shot, a la Buddy Hield a long time ago when he had to fix his shot sophomore year of college. Will they look at it and go, it's the system he's in. It's playing next to RJ, playing next to Zion that is creating this inconsistency because he can never get in a rhythm because of the environment that he is offensively, where it's not the same thing every game. It's being able to just do it on a dime when Zion and RJ don't have the ball.
I mean, I think that's kind of a cop-out. If you're a good player, you're a good player. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter. And if you take away the Florida State game, so then 3 of the last 4 games that he's played, Clemson, Wake Forest, and Virginia, he has gone 3 of 17 from 3.
Mm-hmm.
If that's supposed to be your specialty, not very special. Not very special in those games, and it would be worse if I went in games farther back.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. That is not good, and especially when you're bringing up the great point of many of his shots are coming from there. He goes 2 of 12 in a game where he also went 1 of 9 from 3, or 4 of 12 went 0 of 5 from 3, 3 of 11, 3 of 8 from 3.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, Ricky, is that the reason why we can talk about this as not being a complete and utter disappointment for Duke is because at the same time they have Cam Reddish, they have RJ Barrett, they have Zion Williamson, they have Tre Jones, obviously, who is injured. If they were relying solely on a guy like Cam Reddish right now, they didn't have a Zion, they didn't have an RJ, well, they probably wouldn't be Duke then, but we would be talking a much different game
mm-hmm.
with Cam Reddish, because he would be killing his team instead of just kind of playing a third fiddle and people saying, well, he hasn't been doing great, but they haven't been losing because of him. They've been winning. They've been winning a lot of their games, only with 2 losses on the season. It's a different story without those other 2 guys. Cam Reddish
mm-hmm.
lately, he's been a huge disappointment and a liability on the floor.
Well, and the thing I find, of course, this website that I just found, the Stepien.com, they have a shot chart, and I will say They haven't updated the shot chart since Christmas. So everything since the Clemson game on, so 4 games have not been added into this, but you can still kind of use it for ballpark. If you're looking at the 3-point shot for Cam Reddish, left wing, so basically left side and left corner, is 3 of 10. He's shooting 30%. Above the break, so everything in the middle, he's 20 of 53, about 37, almost 38%. And then the right wing, similar to the left wing, 3 of 10, 30%. That's the thing that I think going forward, that with Tyus Jones being out, and kind of to go to that question that I was getting to at the beginning, was how is Tyus Jones going to hurt their draft stock? Cam Reddish might be the one that it hurts, because he's the one to me that is not the ball dominant one in this system, or that we have not seen be the ball dominant. Zion is ball dominant. RJ, the ball in his hands, likes to shoot up a bunch of shots. Wins and losses, it's not going to affect only when we get to like Virginia and Syracuse. Or even, let's see what happens when they get to UNC, but I don't expect UNC to be a huge problem for Duke, because they have their own questions that I have with their team. Last question I want to ask you, and this is the Zion question that I had you prepped for. So on the jump, Scottie Pippen said that there is nothing that Zion needs to work on in college. He's already solidified his #1 draft stock. And on the jump, Scottie Pippen said Zion should sit out the rest of the year. I want to pose that question to you. Should Zion Williamson shut it down for the rest of the year? Or do you think that he has, like, basically, should he shut it down the rest of the year, or should he play out the rest of the season?
No, he shouldn't shut it down the rest of the year. I think, I'll be honest with you, I think guys doing that, that's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. It'd be one thing if Zion Williamson was injured. Now go back to, if you transition over to football and college football, where we had Nick Bosa shut it down for the rest of the year. Okay, still kind of weird. You kind of like withdrew from school, shut it down for the rest of the year. But he was injured. There was an injury there. Zion Williamson is completely healthy, and he is the lifeblood of Duke basketball. Let's be honest about it. There's no reason for him to shut it down. Why? Why not enjoy, especially you love playing basketball. You're a healthy player. You are good. You are great. People love watching you night in and night out. It's obvious. Everyone knows it, and he knows it too. You have 1 year at Duke. Then you're going to the NBA. Keep playing. Ridiculous to shut it down. In my opinion. Different if there's an injury. Then I can maybe get it. There is no injury. Do not shut it down. Well,
and for me, I understand with the analyst side of things. When an analyst goes, you've solidified your #1. Like, his big thing, Scottie Pippen said, was, with your body size, one wrong fall and you could injure yourself. And if you get injured the rest of the season...
My gosh, Ricky, you and I walking down the street.
I could sneeze and injure my back.
Yes.
I could do that. Like, would I? Hopefully not, but I could do that. And that's why, for me, like, I am on the side of don't shut it down. Because, like you said, like, he is the lifeblood of Duke. And it depends on what's going on in Zion's head, if winning in college is important, because every guy is different. But for me, if he shuts it down and it's just RJ and Cam Reddish, this Duke team changes. This Duke team changes. They're no longer, to me, yes, they're still a really good team. They'll probably still be a 1 seed, but they are no longer that team that is, like, for sure probably going to run through the tournament and win everything. However, there is a chance that they can lose. They've done it before. You just catch them on the wrong night or the right night for the other team, and they can get a win. I wanted to throw it your way because Zion is who he is at #1, but I am with you. Do not shut it down. Keep it going and make this year one of the most special years in Duke basketball. Any final thoughts before we move on into Matt's segment?
No.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section about Tre Jones See, I caught myself twice now. Tre Jones' injury, how does that affect Duke? And then anything we talked about, the draft stocks of Zion, RJ, and mainly Cam Reddish. That's the one that we mainly hit tonight on the podcast. And, of course, the Zion question. Let us know what you think. Should he shut it down or not? And let's move on into our next topic, Brandon. It's a very special one because we have joining us again. Love when we have him on the podcast. Matt calling us from... At this point, I forget, Matt, where you're calling us from, but you're calling us from somewhere, I hope. And first off, haven't talked to you in a while. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm trying to stay warm. It's getting pretty cold out.
I'll ask you this. This is a random question that I asked Sean and Dave this week. If you had to choose one, which would you choose? Like, you have to live somewhere. Either somewhere where you deal with severe hurricanes or severe snowstorms. What would you pick?
I think I'll go snowstorms.
See, that's what I thought too. What would you... I haven't asked you, Brandon.
So my first thought was snowstorm, but then my second thought was hurricanes don't happen every year. Snowstorms do.
Yeah, but I mean, with how global warming is happening, like hurricanes happen every year now.
Yeah, I'd almost maybe say that.
You would say the hurricane?
Because the rest of the time would be better too. The weather would be better. There wouldn't be all this cold nonsense.
Yeah, it's just a thought that comes through the mind of Ricky Widmer when he drives to record. Because I'm driving through all this snow this weekend, and I'm like, you know what? I hate it, but I would not want my house to be destroyed by a hurricane. But Matt's calling in. We're talking about Big Ten basketball today. Before we get into it, I'm going to pump the iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to go on iTunes and Apple Podcasts to rate and review the Primetime Podcast. I believe we're still at a 4.5. Want to bump that rating up as high as we can get, and we cannot do it without your help. So even if you're on YouTube, please go over to our iTunes and Apple Podcasts, type in the Primetime Podcast. You'll see our yellow logo, and then make sure you rate and review the podcast. But Matt, we're talking the state of Big Ten basketball, and with this one, because it's kind of an ever-flowing topic, can go in many different directions, I'm going to let you start. You kind of lead the conversation. When the state of Big Ten basketball, where do you want to start the conversation?
I guess just generally I want to start in maybe comparing back to last year and how much the Big Ten has improved.
Okay.
I guess just, last year the Big Ten only got 4 teams in the NCAA tournament, which is very much low when, compared to how much they normally get in. Versus this year, it's a heck of a competitive conference from top to bottom, probably the most competitive in the nation. So I guess that's kind of where I want to hit on first.
Okay, then I'll ask you this. Bracketology right now, the Big Ten has 4 teams that are ranked. Purdue technically in the conference standings are above Iowa, but Purdue is not ranked. Where do you see, like you mentioned, teams that got in the tournament last year kind of low for the Big Ten? Do you think then that the Big Ten is going to have more teams in the tournament this year?
Oh, for sure. If they don't, something's terribly wrong. I mean, I think you're talking probably 7 or 8 for sure, and then with the possibility of 10. And if going along that line of thinking, bracketology right now, Joe Lunardi does have 10 Big Ten teams in the tournament. And I think at face value, people might not realize, okay, I'm seeing 4 ranked teams. How do you get to 10? And I think the real answer is, 1, the rankings don't mean a whole lot. But 2, it's just that it's so stacked that the Big Ten's starting to beat up on each other in the middle. You got a bunch of quality teams that are going to be beating each other up night in and night out.
Well, you look at it right now, and 11 of the 14 teams overall have a record above 500. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive from even the spot where they were last year. And that's, Matt, what you were saying, from top to bottom, it's really not a bad conference. Penn State, obviously, they haven't won a game in the conference, and then you have Rutgers and Illinois both only with 1 win each inside the conference. But even in the middle, your teams like your Wisconsin's, Minnesota's, Nebraska's, Indiana, I mean, they're all talking that these teams very much while not being ranked right now, have an opportunity to be a tournament team come March. So that's, I think, another thing where you look at that and you say, a year ago, this was a Big Ten that people were laughing at because it was so down, and that people were saying, well, maybe. I mean, I remember, Rick, you and I, maybe 4?
Yeah.
3 definitely. And it's so interesting on how far this has come now, with Michigan, I think, being the last team to be undefeated, finally having their first loss of 17-1. But how good, and I think this sometimes too is a knock that conferences will get. Let's say that the Big Ten has 10 teams that go into the tournament. How many of them actually play well? Because that's what we've seen too many times when a conference gets a lot of teams in there. They'll get a lot of teams, and by the second weekend, almost half of them have been eliminated.
Well, I mean, I'll look at one. I'll throw it right now. Minnesota. And the reason why I say them is you look at bracketology right now, and of course Joe Lunardi's not the committee, but right now Minnesota would be lined up to be an 11 in the East region. For Lunardi, they would play Arizona in Dayton for the first day of games. Then they would have to go to San Jose to play Florida State. Well, Florida State's a team. Just took Duke recently all the way to the wire. Minnesota's a team. Couldn't even walk out of, I got to double check if that game, couldn't even walk out of Champaign with a win against Illinois this year. Like, let's just put it this way. FAU has done something that you could not do this year. I just want to put that into perspective for Minnesota. Like, that is, to me, a perfect example of team. And the thing that also plays into this is how these teams will play over the season. Where how many times do we see a team get hot late where it's like, oh, they'll be in the tournament, they'll be a lower team. They get hot late, a la like a Syracuse when they were a 10 seed. That was also a thank God we got seeded there because we got a little bit of an easier road to the championship rather than what we had. That was the year that we had went to the UC to watch them play in the Sweet 16. And, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It could benefit a team. Like, hey, we're going to get in, we're going to be an 11-10 seed, run through this tournament because we're playing teams. But, like, it could also hurt because right now Minnesota, I throw that out there because in their last 4 are 2-2 where, yeah, they've beat Penn State by 1 point, I will say, and they beat Rutgers, who isn't that good, but they lose to Maryland, who's the second-best team in the conference right now, and they go on the road to Illinois, and they lose. Their next 3 games are, I'd even say their next, 6 games are tough then. At Michigan, home against Iowa. Illinois, you didn't beat them once, so I guess I can let Illinois beat you again. Purdue, Wisconsin, who just beat Michigan, and Michigan State. So, like, that's a team, like, there are teams that are lower on. Minnesota's the one I use. Let's see where they're at 6 games down because this could be a next 6 games where they go 0-6, 1 of 5, maybe 2 of 4, and they're not sitting at 14-4 anymore like they are right now.
Yeah, and I agree with your assessment of Minnesota. I think if we're going to talk about any of those teams that are currently projected into the tournament, they're kind of maybe the team to really be concerned with. As you mentioned, got hammered by Illinois and then barely could beat Penn State at home. And I think, I guess I don't know if you guys know about this, but they've kind of gotten rid of the RPI system this year. Mm-hmm. They've realized how bad it was, and they're going to this net ranking system. And if you look at the net rankings, Minnesota is all the way down at 65. So I think that kind of reflects that the analytics don't support that they really are that good of a team. So maybe they find their way out. But what it does support is that the fact that the Big Ten is a good conference. In fact, in the net rankings, I'm looking right now, it has 7 teams in the top 25, even though the AP, only has 4. So I think and I think Ken Palm, which is another, analytic approach, I think same story, 7 Big Ten teams in the top 25. So I think that kind of more so supports what we're saying here in terms of the depth of the Big Ten.
So I've got a random question, unless you have something that you were going to throw out, B. Random question for either of you that wants to take it, because yet again, having a ton of teams in the tournament doesn't mean that, your conference is more superior. It just means you've got a lot of teams kind of fighting with each other that have good records and hopefully deserve to be in. Here's a question I want to ask, though, is basically, if any of these Big Ten teams, we know maybe a Michigan or a Maryland might not be, more so Michigan because they might be a 1 seed along with this team. But let's say any of the lower seeded Big Ten teams are put in the same region as Duke. Could you see any of these Big Ten teams in the tournament giving Duke a fight and knocking them off in the tournament? Being that to the measuring stick for the Big Ten? Because I would say if the Big Ten got the most teams in and then one of their teams knocked off Duke, we'd look at the Big Ten and go, holy crap, they knocked off Duke, no matter who it is.
I'd say the only two that could possibly do it, maybe Michigan or maybe Michigan State. Mm-hmm. I think they're the only two. I don't think any other Big Ten team would be able to hang with Duke. Now, maybe that is an incorrect assessment, but I think that Duke is really, most of the ACC teams cannot hang with Duke.
The two best defensive teams have been the only ones that can hang with them.
So that's why I look at that and I say Michigan State and Michigan maybe. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, Duke is in rare form this year. Mm-hmm. They're in rare form this year where they have 3 of the top recruits. The 3 top recruits all went to Duke. The possible 1, 2, and 3 picks in the draft are all at Duke. It's really crazy, and I don't see too many teams being able to get into Duke's way come tournament time as long as they're healthy. But if there are more injuries that happen to creep up on this team or inconsistencies that really settle in, that's the only way that I think we could see another team jump up and get them. Of course, I think right now they're probably the favorite. But my also question that I kind of wanted to bring up too, and Matt, you can go with Ricky's first and then kind of take mine here, is how good is Michigan State this year? How good is Michigan State? Because last year I thought that they were going to prove to be much better come tournament time. And then they went up against what seemed to be for them a brick wall in Syracuse, and they could not get anything done. Their outside shooting was really not that good, and to beat a team like Syracuse, outside shooting probably has to be good because you're not going to get much inside, and they couldn't get much on any side. So they also are going into one of their, I think, toughest stretches so far right now. Obviously, they're 2 losses. The first one coming to Kansas at the beginning of the season, and then Louisville a couple of maybe 2 weeks after that. But they've got Maryland tonight, Iowa on the road, Purdue on the road, Indiana at home. That's a pretty tough stretch for me, for them. And then their final one is going to be their last 4 games, where they go road Michigan, road Indiana, home Nebraska, home Michigan. Right now, I think this is where we're going to find out how good this Michigan State Spartan team is.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with Ricky's question. As far as who in the Big Ten can compete with a Duke, I think Brandon nailed it. I think really, I talk about the depth, but when it comes down to it, I think there's really only 2 maybe legitimate title contenders, and that's Michigan and Michigan State in terms of they've separated themselves a little more from the rest of the pack. Brandon, to your question on Michigan State, then just how good are they? It's pretty amazing. I mean, to be honest, and it's not just them actually. It's multiple teams within the conference that lost a ton of talent, like you said. Michigan State losing Jackson and Bridges, and I guess that's it. But
a ton of talent within those players.
But right, yeah, two huge pieces, right? I mean, I think really what's kind of elevated them back to this level of success is I think Cassius Winston. I think he's played phenomenal this year, and he's, as a point guard, has really kind of set the tone for the rest of the team. I think he's probably a legitimate, All-American, first-team All-American right now, and maybe even, second behind who we know is the National Player of the Year, and Williamson probably. So I think they're real. I think you're right. We're going to find out a little more here as they get into the brutal part of their schedule. But even if they lose a few games, I wouldn't take that as a warning sign of they're not that good. I think they are. I think the Big Ten is going to present challenges, and they might lose a few on the way. But I think they're in it for the long haul.
See, here's the thing that I wonder against like Michigan State, and this is kind of what you can take any team, any conference, it's a little bit different, of a conference opponent against a non-conference opponent, where most of these teams, because let's be honest, they're mostly not Duke, not Kentucky, a lot of these Big Ten teams don't have one-and-doners on their team. There were a few, but not a big amount of one-and-done players. Like, you look at Michigan, they've got some players that were on that team last year. Charles Matthews stepping up, returning from that runner-up team. I know that like Miles Bridges wasn't a one-and-done, but Jaren Jackson was for Michigan State. But I just look at it and I wonder how much they see the opponents in the Big Ten. They become familiar with these opponents, become familiar with the coaches on the other side, and kind of where the players can almost predict what the coaches are going to do, much like Tom Izzo can almost predict what the coach on the other side of the court is going to do. To me, it comes to the non-conference, and I look at their non-conference teams. They beat a Florida on the road. That's probably, to me, their best win, because Florida, not a terrible team, but in the SEC is a 2-3 team right now. The win against UCLA, it was number 17 at the time, but that win, to me, is being devalued by the day, especially when they fire their head coach. That kind of tanks that win a little bit. And then you look at, like, Kansas, who's going to be a top 4 team. They'll probably be one of the number 1 seeds or number 2, depending how the year ends out. They lost to them, and I know it was beginning of the year, so each team grows, but you lose to them. You lose to a Louisville team that I thought that they should have beaten in November. With a Michigan State, I wonder what they will do in the tournament when they do get, okay, you've gotten maybe not game 1 because they'll have time to prepare for that, but game 2, okay, you've had a day. You played on Friday, now you're playing on Sunday. Is somebody going to be able to get the best of you and say, hey, you know what? We got the better of you because you didn't have as long to plan for us. I know it's different than football, but you didn't have as long to plan for us. We're in the Big Ten Conference. It didn't really need that because they're more familiar with the team, so they didn't need much longer than a couple days to plan for a Big Ten team. Does that am I weird for thinking that about Michigan State?
No, I mean I don't necessarily think so. I'll give it over to Matt on that, but I'm just gonna say quickly no and let Matt take it all. I don't want to take his precious time.
Well, yeah, I mean I think part of that's just the nature of the NCAA tournament, though, and that's why we love it, right? Though it's just because it's so random, and when it truly comes down to it. If these teams, like if Michigan State plays Middle Tennessee State 10 times, they probably only lose that game once, right? 2 years ago when they got upset or whatever.
And it's the one they played.
Well, exactly. But so I guess, I don't know. To that point, I don't know. I never put a ton of stock in the NCAA tournament just because it is so random. It's matchup. It's everything. But as far as could not being able to prepare for a game impact them? I would say the numbers support probably no, because take analytics for what they're worth, but their data. If I'm looking again at Ken Palm, Michigan State's adjusted offense and defense are both in the top 10, supporting that, all around that they're efficient on both ends of the floor. And I think that will travel no matter who they play. I think, some of that is inherent to who you are as a team, and some of that doesn't change. How you perform and execute within a game, that's open to randomness of the NCAA tournament. But as a whole, I don't think you can argue with those numbers support that they are a legitimate team with a good base for success.
And the thing that I look at is, I'm going to bridge it over from one team Brandon brings up in the state of Michigan over to the other team in the state of Michigan. The one thing I feel with the Big Ten is that I have a strong feeling that Michigan, how do I want to phrase this? I'll put it this way. I will predict it right now, put my money where my mouth is. You know what's going to be our national championship this year? Michigan-Duke. Unless they're on the same side, then that's the Final Four matchup. I feel like from the Big Ten, what I've seen from Michigan and how, I want to say, experienced they have been. Because, of course, they do have a big freshman. You've got Iggy Brzdikas kind of balling out right now, the big freshman coming in. Yes, they lose Abdul Rahman, one of my favorite players just because of his name, last year. Look at the other players leading their team. Charles Matthews, upperclassman. Jordan Poole, upperclassman. Xavier Simpson, upperclassman. They are led with their upper class, even with Iggy out there. And I have a feeling that when it comes to the Big Ten, each team kind of has a story for me. Michigan, I'm very confident that they're going to make a run this year. Maryland, I'm kind of questioning their, I'm going to say, validity as a tournament team, because they're not usually, yes, they were good, but they haven't been that top team. And can they make that staple this year with that? Michigan State, I kind of feel like they're that team that, hey, you've been here before, your coach knows what to do, but you don't have those big names. Cassius Winston has been balling out. Matt Dave is going to be happy that you mentioned his name, because on our big board, he was all over Cassius Winston towards the bottom end. But with Michigan State, I'm a little lower on this year because they don't have the big names like they've had in years past. And then you've got Purdue and Iowa, where to me, they kind of, with me, sit into those teams where they don't have the big names like they've had in years past. Kind of like with Michigan State, but on a peg lower, to where in conference play, these teams beat each other up. And they're all going to be close with each other. You look at the records, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are at 4-3 right now, where you have to go down to the bottom 4, 5 teams for teams that are under 500. Technically, Indiana's under 500 in their conference standings, but there are a few teams besides Northwestern, Rutgers, Illinois, and Penn State that people just kind of write off right away because they have 2, 1, or 0 wins in the conference. I just wonder how this moving forward is going to, how is the committee going to look at it? Are they going to look at it like we've been saying, hey, this is a tough conference, kind of like Joe Lunardi has, these 10 teams deserve to be in because they beat each other up? Or if a team like Minnesota loses a bunch of games, will they then say, well, no, you're not that good, I don't care what conference you're in? And could a team or two from these 10 that we are seeing kind of be played out of it, and we kind of settle at the end with more 8 rather than 10, what we're seeing now?
Maybe. I mean, we still have so much more basketball left to play, and that's that's the thing. It's not that we have just a week or two. There is still so much time to see other teams separate themselves from the middle of the pack and move more towards where Michigan State and Michigan are. And I mean, I guess I'll throw Maryland in there too. I hate to keep them out because Maryland fans would be saying, hey, we're 7-1, we're 16-3, we're good too. But Like, Matt, I've got to ask you. I ask you every freaking year. Is Purdue going to actually do something this year? I mean, and I know you're asking the same question, but I think that Purdue always seems to be, and I've talked to you about this when we're not talking on the air here, is that they can be such a good team during the regular season, but once it's tournament time, once it's time to play with the big dogs and the big games, they get scared, they pack it up, they go home, and they say, we'll try next year.
Farthest they've been, Sweet 16 in the Matt Prater era.
I mean, it's when does that end? When does that end for Purdue and for a Purdue basketball fan to say with confidence, I know that this Purdue team is going to not only play well in the regular season, not only play well in the conference, but that they're also going to play well come conference tournament time and national tournament time.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. So they always seem to fall short in the tournament. And while it's not an excuse, I will point out that like 3 of their 4 best teams literally lost a starter either like weeks before the tournament or during the tournament in the case of last year, Haas breaking his elbow.
Yeah.
So again,
I mean, terrible.
Just unfortunate. But as far as when does that day happen, I mean, I think if you look at this year's team, they started out with Carson was the one known. He was the one of the 5 starters coming back, 4 senior starters graduating, and you knew he could score, but you didn't know how he would adapt to this new role where he was going to be the guy. And out of the gate, to be honest, he struggled. I mean, he's averaging 25 points a game, but he's not being very efficient to get there, or at least he wasn't. And Purdue, unfortunately, you probably would trade schedules this year with last year. They played like, I don't know, 4 or 5 top 15 teams, either on road or neutral sites. And sure enough, they lost all of them. And Purdue was 1 point was 6-5, which makes where they're at now seem pretty heroic. They're 12-6 and 4th in the conference, and they're on the uptrend. And the reason for that is now that the other pieces besides Carson Edwards have really kind of figured out their roles, and Carson is starting to trust them more, and all around they're locking in defensively. So as far as this in-season change, it's been very welcome. As far as what it yields long-term, it's hard to say. I mean, Purdue, a 12-6 team, they're not ranked. No one thinks a whole lot of them. Well, I'll go again to Ken Pom. Somehow, Ken Pom, with Purdue at 6 losses, has them at 9th, suggesting that, analytically they are a pretty good team, and net rankings have them at 15th. So that, of course, takes into account the schedule and how they've been playing as of late. But I guess it's a long-winded answer to say that as far as the tournament, I don't know that this is the best season to judge that, just because they did lose so much talent, and that where they're at is coming into a good spot, I would say. This is pretty much maybe what you can expect out of this year, but it's hard to say what that even yields into next year, because I'm pretty sure we're going to lose Carson Edwards, and then, what's left and what does that look at like next year? I don't know. But I will say the one thing I'll end with this is that if you have a guy like Carson Edwards on your team, anything can happen in the tournament as far as that guy kind of taking the reins and carrying you far. We've seen it before with Steph Curry, obviously, and I know there's plenty of other examples, but if you have that guy on your team and you have enough supporting cast, which Purdue is finally starting to get, I won't put it past that they couldn't make a run. I don't think they're necessarily suited for it, but you never know.
Matt, my question, bringing up kind of the rankings, the Ken Pom and, some things like that, and going away from RPI, how do you think that maybe help someone like Ricky and I, who are looking at stuff and trying to analyze some of these teams and see who's going to be good, who's going to possibly make a run? How much more accurate do you think these rankings could be for us to be able to look at a team that is that team coming out of nowhere. You know how you say, you know, Purdue is on Ken Pom, I think it was, ranked at 9 for what they could be. Obviously, Purdue right now not ranked at anything right now in the rankings. But how much more accurate are possibly these rankings than what RPI was, and what that kind of told us and told the fans and everything like that? I guess I'm just always so curious how it gets to the point of, okay, well, we didn't even see this team coming, you know, out of thin air. Part of it certainly has to do with just that tournament atmosphere. Some teams just go on that run, and that's what we love. That's what we absolutely love. That's why so many people love college basketball and March Madness. But could these rankings be more accurate for us to be able to say, hey, you know, this team over here, Loyola, man, we could have seen them coming with this ranking because of all the stuff that it's taking into account as opposed to what it was before.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I'm actually looking it up right now. So I don't know where they were prior to the tournament run, but if I look at Ken Pom last year, Loyola was ranked 31st. So, you know,
sure,
suggesting they were an adequate team. And if I kind of look at this year, I'm going to go to maybe what I'm going to say is a comparable team is Buffalo, a team that not everyone thinks of, but they're playing fairly well. And Ken Pom has them at 20. So, you know, backing up the fact that they are a legitimate team. And I guess we can probably find examples where it proves the other way. But I guess I'll go back to Minnesota. We're talking about they have a 14-4 record, but we've talked about their recent struggles. And again, Ken Pom has them at 66, which kind of more accurately, I think, depicts what sort of team they are, what we should expect them to be. So I think there's a reason you're seeing the NCAA ditch the RPI and go more to this analytic stuff, because they realize it's proven data, right? It's a better indicator than anything else, but better indicator than everyone's own opinions, where you're going to get different answers all around. It's objective, and it's taking on-court performance and categorizing it. So I don't know. I like the idea, and I think it just makes it better all around.
Here's what I'll say, and this is kind of me. As you guys have been talking, I've been looking at stuff, and first I'll start with Purdue. The thing I'll say with Purdue is look at the last 2 years they've been in the tournament, Sweet 16 exits. The thing I want to say is look at the teams that eventually beat them. Last year was Texas Tech. That Jarrett Culver and Zaire Smith team beat them in the Sweet 16. Before that, Purdue had beat Butler. Yeah, it was a close 3-point game, and they beat Cal State Fullerton the one before. 2 years ago, they beat Vermont. They then beat Iowa State. Who did they lose to in that Sweet 16 game? Just the number 1 seeded Kansas Jayhawk team. And I think for Purdue, the biggest thing is the last 2 years they've gotten over the hump of we're not going to be upset in the first round, because it was, I believe, Cincinnati and then Little Rock the year after were the two teams that beat them in the first round. They've been getting to the second weekend. Now what they need to do is make that next step of like, okay, if we're going to get to the second weekend, we have to know we are going to be playing a higher level of talent, because like a team that I'm going to bring in really quick for the end of this is Maryland, who I mentioned before, and how you mentioned, Brandon, how you were like, oh, I don't want to diss them. Yeah, I don't want to diss them, but look at, since they've been in the Big Ten, they've had a third-round exit, a Sweet 16 exit, a first-round exit, and then didn't even make the tournament last year. And out of their appearances, 2017, they get beat by a 11th seeded Xavier team that went all the way to the Elite Eight before losing to Gonzaga in the Elite Eight game. Then in 2016, they go all the way to the Sweet 16. They beat South Dakota State by 5 points. Then in that second game, and this is the beauty of the tournament that Matt had talked about, they got lucky. A 13-seeded Hawaii team beat that Jaylen Brown And Ivan Rabb team from Cal, they got to play Hawaii in the second round, beat Hawaii, and then lost to number 1 seeded Kansas in the Sweet 16. And then in 2015, they beat Valpo in the first round. Boom, in the second round, or they called it the third round, they lost to West Virginia. So, I mean, they're another team that, even though they're going to be in the tournament, how far are they going to go? And I know that Purdue and Maryland, different. Purdue, it's kind of getting over your own demons, I kind of feel, whereas Maryland, it's more of like, we're just, one year we got lucky, we got to play a 13-seeded team, but really that doesn't matter because it's whoever has the better game that day. But I feel like, to me, the only true team in this conference that I have any confidence in coming into the tournament to go like really far is Michigan. It goes to your point earlier, Brandon, is what type of a Big Ten are we going to see? One where most of those teams get to the second weekend, or by the time we get to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, it's like, well, they're all gone. Only one left. And yet again, beauty of the tournament. It's why we love it. It's not like college football where Alabama always gets in because they're the best team. Where this one, Duke could come in, face a 16 seed, and lose to that 16 seed. Thank you, UMBC. I can finally say that now. But I just feel like the Big Ten is going to have to prove this year in the tournament quality over quantity. Which one is it? Is it just quality, or are there quantity to these teams that get into the tournament?
But everyone has to do that. I mean, every conference has to do that. Every conference that sends multiple teams, that sends
years before was the ACC,
5+ teams. They're going to have to be, always doing that because. There's also numbers of times all the time where we'll see a conference, they'll send 8, and within the first couple of days, 5 are out. And then it has everyone going, well, they were not good. They sucked. And that is that is usually the Big Ten. For whatever reason, people almost always, 1, never want to give the Big Ten credit during the regular season, and 2, when the Big Ten does struggle in the tournament, everyone acts like they're, Colin Cowherd and say, I said it all year long.
Where Colin
was right. I was right, and you were wrong, and I should have my own network on FS1. Actually, don't.
He kind of already does.
No. The individual people.
I know he kind of already does. He kind of already runs that boat over there.
No, I know. I'm not talking about him, Ricky. I said individual people who think they're Colin Cowherd. Okay. Keep up, bud. But I guess that's just the whole thing. So it's always going to come down to that when there's multiple teams going. I guess I just think that this year could be a little bit different for the Big Ten. Yeah, there's a lot of teams right now, but as I said, there's going to be more teams that we start to find are real big-time players in this, and those that start to creep more towards the bottom, where at the end of the day, it may be 7, it may be 8 teams that end up going, but really separating themselves to say, hey, it may be only 7, it may be only 8, but we're a solid 7-8 teams, where at the end, maybe you have 3 going Sweet 16.
Here's to give you an example, and this is just the last 2 years. So last year's tournament, the top 3 conferences, ACC had 9 teams get in. 2 got to the Elite 8, none got further. SEC had 8, none of them got past the Sweet 16. And the Big 12 had 7. 1 team went to 3 went to the Elite 8. 1 went to the Final 4. 2017, ACC with 9. About, 6 of them were out. Only 1 remained from the Sweet 16 on, and that's because the ACC won the national title that year. Big East had 7. 1 was remaining by the Elite 8. They were knocked out after that. Big Ten also had 7. All of their 7 were knocked out in the Sweet 16 weekend. So just kind of to put into perspective of these conferences who had the most and kind of how far each one had gotten. Like, for example, last year, Big East had 6. By the Sweet 16, Villanova is the only one that remained, and they went on to win it all. So just to put it in a little bit of perspective. But, Matt, we'll go to you. Any final thoughts on the state of the Big Ten or anything that you think we hadn't hit in this topic so far?
No, I think we got it. I mean, I think just in general, it's a lot better than it was last year, and this is more of what you expect, and hopefully we see it pan out where it is a juggernaut in terms of all these teams, or a lot of teams make the tournament and go far.
It's a lot less depressing this year, I will say. Last year was like, oh man, how many teams are we going to get? Now we're actually like talking about, oh, there could be a lot of teams getting in. Any final thoughts, B?
No, I think we touched on every single thing we possibly could in the Big Ten.
All right, there's one thing we haven't touched, and I got to get it here at the very end.
I know. I figured maybe we would just skip over it because no one cares.
No, I want to ask you guys very briefly. This doesn't have to be a Ricky rant. I don't need to rant about them. Like, I've gotten to the point where Illinois this year is not even worth my time. I'll wait till next year.
Ricky, that just sounds like...
I know, it sounds so defeated.
Doesn't it suck to not only be a Cub fan, but also an Illinois fan?
No, the Cubs are good now, though.
Well, I mean,
the Cubs are good.
That's your own perspective.
Like, I can actually be excited about the Cubs.
The Cubs were good. They had been, and it's over.
I'm happy. I'm happy going to the NLCS for sure in each of the years. But, I mean... The thing that I want to ask you guys, and this is kind of, I want to get an outside of Illinois perspective, is Brad Underwood going to be the guy? Like, should we be already looking for the next guy at Illinois? Like, is he the problem? Because I keep looking at it and I'm going, you didn't do well last year. I know you've got a young team this year, and maybe we put too much stock in Ayo, not Demboya, Dosumu, the Morgan Park kid who was really good and this year showing some growing pains in college, but has shown how he's good or not. I just want outside opinion really quick to maybe talk me off the ledge. Brad Underwood, should we be confident in him? Like maybe, yes, this team can go forward, or should me and Orange and Blue Nation be looking for a new head coach soon?
Matt, go ahead.
I mean, I think you got to give him another year. I mean, I think I saw he just got another top 40 recruit coming in next year. So for that reason alone, I don't think you want to give him up. But
that's even worse when you have him come in and you can't do anything with them.
No doubt. I mean, if something, I think you got to get another year just because you got to make sure he gets his guys in and everything for sure. But after that, then I think you really got to step back. And I mean, if you're not at least, you know, even if it's NIT at that point, if you're not at least threatening that, then you got to definitely reconsider.
John Gross got us into the tournament.
This is what I would say. You got to keep him, as long as you continue to keep Lovey and football sucks, you've got to keep Underwood. Because it's fair. It's just about being fair. Because Lovey has come in and been able to do literally nothing with the Illinois football program. So let's see what Underwood can do. This is what, year 2, 3? Right now,
year 2 of Underwood.
This is year 2 of Underwood. I mean, you have to give him at least now 4 because I think that's how many Lovey's been there, right?
Yeah.
So he's got to. We all know he's going to get multiple more years. That's just what Illinois does. But I'm with Matt. You have to play out the rest of this year. You have to give him another year next year. You have to hope in year 3 that he's going to eventually do something good to get to year 4. Otherwise, you know he's going to be there year 4. You just don't know if it's going to be good year 4.
And the thing that makes me feel bad, and this is the last thing I'll say, is being down on the team. And every time we lost, I would have a running joke. Before Tom Thibodeau got fired, I would have a running joke on Twitter that every time Illinois lost, I would just send out the tweet that, well, I hear Fred Hoiberg's looking for a job, because Fred Hoiberg is looking for a job, and kind of like, oh, maybe we should fire Brad Underwood and bring in Fred Hoiberg, maybe make him the mayor of Champaign. But I mean, the thing that irks me, well, not irks me, but like gets me down is I doubt the team, and then I see tweets from like the players that are like, oh, if you're going to doubt us now, don't be on the bandwagon when we're good. And there's a part of me that's like, no, I want to be on the bandwagon because I want you to be good now. But there's a part of me, maybe it's that Cubs fan in me, that how much more losing can I take? How much
108
more
years
can I
of
take? It. Well, I did 108 years of it, and then we won it all. So
Did you do 108, all 108
no,
with
I didn't
them
do
side
all
by
108.
side?
Pretty much, I did maybe the first season I really remember.
You probably did a solid
is like
15.
96, 95, 96. Kerry Wood's 97 season is very vivid in my head. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below about the state of the Big Ten, anything about Big Ten basketball. If you're a fan of a Big Ten basketball team, let us know what you feel about the conference and your individual team as well. I want to thank Matt for joining us. You can be like Matt if you go on to patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast and join us at the $10 tier. We obviously can't do what we do without the love of our patrons. So, Matt, thank you for coming on. But, Brandon, let's move on into our final segment. And before we get into it, got to thank Matt again for joining the podcast. Make sure if you're on YouTube, go and check out our wonderful conversation that we had with Matt about Big Ten basketball and kind of the state of the Big Ten. But we're going to keep the college basketball podcast going, Brandon, looking more so at a draft topic to end things out, kind of looking at a spotlight with players. By the time this goes up on, I'm trying to think, by the time this goes up both on podcast services around the world and on YouTube, you can also check out the Fast Break. I'm going to pitch that. We talked about Kevin Porter Jr. and his suspension last week. That video should be up, and that podcast is already up. But Brandon, today you and I are taking a look at Romeo Langford. And Romeo Langford, to me, is one of the most, I don't want to say interesting. I kind of want to use the word unique, but I don't even know if that word kind of fits in with what I'm going into. Is he is a player so far, and this is via the comment sections, where I feel like people either love him or they hate him. Either you're too high on him, you're too low on him. There's no in the middle with Romeo Langford. And Romeo Langford, depending on where you look, I know you and I, it was eons ago when we did a big board together. The next big board, the 3.0, will be us again. But beginning of the year or towards the beginning of the year, we were both very high on Romeo. You had him at 5. I even had him at 4. So both of us had him in the top 5. Then in our second one, that was around the end of the year after Christmas, he had fallen all the way to 11 in my big board. And even when you look at the mock draft that Sean, Dave, and I do on the Fast Break, it's very split up. Sean has him 6, I had him 10, Dave has him outside the top 10. So what I want to ask you is, when it comes to Romeo Langford, are we, not me and you, but like a collective we overall, are we too low, or have Romeo Langford too low in our mock drafts and our big board, and are we too low on him?
Going from the last spot that you had him, just at 10 or 11?
Going at this one, like how we have him maybe at the end of the top 10, is that too low for him, or should he be, a top 5, almost top 5 prospect?
See, here's the thing that makes it difficult with Romeo Langford is that, he comes into college basketball as a 5-star prodigy. And he's named Mr. Basketball. He's given all of these names. CBS calls him the chosen prince of IU. And
the chosen prince of IU.
I guess I just think, you look at how Indiana's played the last 4 games. It's been bad.
Mm-hmm.
They're not good. Not the last 4 games. When I hear all those things, when I hear chosen prince, Mr. Basketball, 5-star prodigy, you know what I think of? You better be just like Zion Williamson. That's what I think of. Guy who's doing it all, who's got the body type, who's big, who's NBA ready like the day he came in to college, and everything that he seems to do. I'm not saying he's perfect. Of course not. But almost everything he seems to do, he does it so well. And he can do all these different things.
It's like I mentioned on the Fast Break, and this is the difference between Zion and everyone else. With Romeo, and I'm going to bring up one today, we look at a weakness and go, oh man, like, oh, he's really got to work on this if he wants to improve his draft stock. With Zion, it's like, well, if he could improve his three, like, he'd become a really good player. Like, it's not a knock that he can't shoot the three well. Like, we look at it and just go, well, yeah, if he does that, then, man, he'll be a really phenomenal NBA player at the next level, and kind of the difference that Zion has on everyone else.
I guess my whole thing is, well, at the end of the day, is Romeo Langford going to end his career at IU being a 20-point-per-game player, someone who did make an impact, someone who was a really good player for them? Yes, he's going to. But at the end of the day, are people also going to look and go, yeah, that Romeo Langford guy, he was really good, but he didn't take Indiana anywhere. They went nowhere. They didn't. They maybe made a bid to the tournament. They didn't go far. That's where it's. Where do you cut off the difference between good as a player and couldn't take his team anywhere? Because are you a bad player if you don't take your team anywhere? Are you a bad player if you do not succeed? If you do not help your team to succeed in the regular season, to get to the tournament, to make a good in a long tournament run, are you then no longer a good player? It's somewhere in the gray there for me, especially here on Romeo Langford, is that yes, he is a really good player, but I don't think that he's ever going to measure up to the names that he's been given. Well, not here with IU.
And here's the thing I look at too is with Romeo Langford, I'm not going to put team success in, like, he is not going to be the only one to bring this team to where they're at, because you look at some of the teams that are in the top 5, Tennessee, who's at number 1, Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield are in NBA draft mocks. They're in draft conversations. They're both averaging 18, 17 a game. They're both really good players. Duke, we've talked about them. We know they have 3 phenomenal players. You look at Virginia. They've got Kyle Guy and DeAndre Hunter, who lead that team at the top with various different skills. Gonzaga, they always have different players. You've got Norville, you've got Clark, you've got Rui Hachimura, you've got hopefully Killian Tilly. Right now, back 5 games, can get under it and get back to where he was last year. And then you have Michigan, where Michigan has 3 good guys. Poole's been doing well, but with Charles Matthews and Iggy Brisdikis, I think I said that right, or Brisdikis? Yeah, I think I did. With Iggy and Matthews, they have more than one player. With Indiana, yeah, I know they've got Juwan Morgan, but him and Romeo have not been on the level of those other teams. Like, you look at Indiana's schedule that they've just had recently, and they were 12-2, just coming off of a win against Illinois, where Illinois almost beat them. It was 73-65. Michigan, I'll give you a pass because Michigan was undefeated at the time and they were really good. But then you lose to Maryland, you lose to Nebraska, and then you lose to Purdue. And that Purdue game was so bad for Romeo Langford that there is video on YouTube that I have seen that he went 22 minutes, shot 2 of 10 from the field, 0 of 3 from beyond the arc, went 0 of 4 from the foul line. That means there's no one in your face. And you went 0 of 4. Couldn't even hit 2 of them, like Zion might have been able to. And he only scored 4 points in that game. The student section in that one was calling him overrated. And I think the biggest reason of why I personally am so low on Romeo Langford is a word that you used with Cam Reddish. Inconsistent. This is a guy that I don't think will be a 20-point scorer for the for Indiana, because I was pulling up Tennessee. Their 2 guys aren't scoring over 20. The only team in the top 5 that has people averaging more than 20 points, the Bulldogs from Gonzaga, Rui Hachimura, is averaging 20 a game, and the Duke Blue Devils, RJ and Zion, both averaging more than 20 points per game. I don't think Romeo will ever get there. And the thing with Romeo is, one, the inconsistency where against Illinois has a good game, 28 points, where he went to the line and 11 of 15 from the line. That's really good if you can get to the line and get that many points. Then against Michigan, it's like, okay, 17, you're kind of down to your normal. You went to the line, you hit all your 6. Then 28 against Maryland, that's a really good game, but then 18 against Nebraska, and then you fall 4 against Purdue. That's number one, inconsistency. Number two, I think the big reason of why, when I look draft-wise for Romeo Langford, it's the 3 ball. The NBA is all about the 3, and he's 0 of 3, 0 of 4, 3 of 6, 1 of 2, 1 of 4, 1 of 3, 0 of 3, 0 of 3, 0 of 3.
It's not his strong suit.
He can't hit the 3. So
it's
for
not
me,
his strong suit.
For me as an NBA team, that's why I would say, hey, if I'm going to pick a guy in after the top 5, if I have a choice between Keldon Johnson, who balled out this weekend on Saturday night, if I have to pick Keldon Johnson or Kevin Porter Jr. or DeAndre Hunter or Rui Hachimura or Romeo Langford, I'm going to pick those other guys right now over you because you're inconsistent. And the one thing offensively that we need from you, you can't do it. You can't hit the 3 ball right now.
I think that's a really great point to bring up because so many scorers are going to be able to do well inside the 3-point line. The long jumper, the short jumper, around the basket, in the paint, all of that, drive to the hoop. Yes, they can score there. But it's what can you do? What makes you a better player outside of that? Are you a good defender? Are you a good 3-point shooter? And for Romeo Langford, are you a good defender? No, not really. Are you a good 3-point shooter? Well, not really. I think that there's got to be something else outside of the normal what you would expect from a player on another team, from a scorer on another team, from a guy who's averaging 20 points, close to 20 points per game, 18. He's not doing it. You know, he's got 5 rebounds per game. He's got 2 assists per game. There's not, outside of the scoring, there's nothing extra. There's nothing extra that makes a team get really excited about you, an NBA team get really excited about you because, oh, we get this guy. We are not shooting the 3 really well right now. We need someone who can do that. This guy can do it. No, you don't have that. Oh, well, we need a defender on this team. We need to get somebody to really pump up the defense. That's not him either. So what you've said, it makes a lot of sense. He's not there. His inconsistency from beyond the arc is so obvious. And it's hurt him. It has hurt him from the point that we both had him at 4 and 5 respectively, you and I, to where he is to where he is right now, and I think that where we would probably also place him right now. Yeah,
and I think another thing too that kind of, because like I'm looking right now, and the guys that I would compare him to in this range is the first one's Jarrett Culver. And yes, there's some of the numbers, like if I had to compare the two, I look at the points are almost the same, but Jarrett Culver has a better 3-point shot, and he's going to get me more rebounds than what you have. Then you have Kevin Porter Jr. His situation's a little bit difficult because we don't know exactly why he's suspended indefinitely, what was said, what wasn't, what personal conduct issues did he have, but he's a guy that I think has, I look at what he shows, and yes, it was only 7 games, but I see more potential in Kevin Porter Jr. and what he can bring, mainly because in those 7 games, he was shooting better from beyond the arc. He was at 34%, where Romeo Langford right now is at a 22.7%. And the big thing, like, that wouldn't bother me if you were only jacking up like 1 attempt, 2 attempts a game. He's attempting 3 to 4 on average. Like 3.7 is where he sits. Kevin Porter Jr. around the same, 3.3, and hits him at a better clip. Keldon Johnson hits it at a better clip and I really like what I see from his game, especially defensively at some points as well, stealing the ball, and he can get to the line and averages 5 free throws a game. And then there's DeAndre Hunter. I've already talked about him in the Duke segment, where he defensively is a lot better than Romeo Langford. Yes, he shoots a lower clip from 3, only 2 a game, but he hits 43% of them, and his defense is off the charts, where you look at what Virginia was able to do against Duke. There is DeAndre Hunter, and he's a big reason for that. So with Romeo Langford, the thing that I think about is, and I know on this side, this is more of an NBA side, and I know this is where my thinking goes. I almost feel like he's going to be one I look back at and go, man, he would have been better like if he was an NBA prospect like 5-6 years ago. Like when the Celtics had KG and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen, and right like before the three-pointer became a do or die for NBA teams. I feel like we're going to look at Romeo Langford and go, man, if he was in a different era, he'd be a lot better than it is, because he hits it from mid-range, can't hit it from 3, and even inconsistencies at the line. Like I said, usually he's a 71% free throw shooter. He went 0-4 from the line against Purdue, and he didn't even get to the line that often. So, like, for me, Romeo, the thing I would need going forward from him to solidify some draft stock is to be more consistent in his play, but I don't even know if he's going to do that, because they're 0-4 in their last 4 against Big Ten opponents. They got Northwestern coming up on the road. That'll be after this goes up on YouTube. They've got Michigan again, Michigan State, Iowa. The Big Ten is tough, and that's the conference he's playing in. And I feel like I'll throw that question on to you. Is that going to hurt him? The conference that he's in, is that going to hurt his draft stock to where maybe the Big Ten wasn't the right conference for you?
Well, it could. I mean, it could, but I think it's going to be more of.
But that's a bad question to ask. Like, why should you have to ask that about a prospect? That's what I just thought in my head.
but it's true. I mean, it's very true. If now let me just bring it back here a little bit, and I just want to see your thoughts. Let's say Romeo Langford's on Duke, Cam Reddish is on Indiana. Are we putting Romeo Langford's name in lights with the other two, RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson, and going,
that's very
well,
interesting.
Cam Reddish, he's good, but he's not like those other 3 over at Duke.
I honestly think if that was the case, it might help both of them. I think that if that's the case and Romeo was where Cam Reddish is, his deficiencies would be hidden a lot better than they are right now. The only thing I wonder with that is RJ is not really, like, his strength is not 3-point shooting. How would that mesh together, Romeo and RJ playing together? But I feel like we would almost give Romeo a pass if he was on a better team. And that brings it back to what you were saying. How much of this is team success? You're the leader of this team. The team's not doing well. It is put on you. The thing with Cam Reddish that's interesting is it's a seesaw. Would we see Cam step up and see the Cam Reddish that we see in his high school tape? Or would we see a Cam Reddish like we're seeing now, where it's like, he's good, but he's not. At that point, we'd be saying, oh, he's good, but he's not top 5 good. And we don't know. Cam Reddish supporters will say, yeah, we'd see the Cam Reddish that we saw in high school, but we'd never know the answer to that question. And for Romeo, with me, it all comes down to the 3-point shot. And could he develop one? Yes. Does he need to develop one? Yes. For me, if I'm an NBA team, if I look at it, of where I'm at, and I know that this is not the fast break, but I'm kind of just going to break it down right now. After the top 4, Zion, Ja, RJ, Cam, this is my thought process of the last mock draft. The Hawks, yeah, we could take them. We could. Like, we've got Tre Jones, we got Kevin Huerter, who were good 3-point shooters in college last year, can shoot from 3 this year. But I really like that Jared Culver guy and his 3-and-D potential at the next level. Has defense, has 3-point range. Then with the Wizards, we got John Wall, we got Bradley Beal. We got enough. Like, I know John Wall and Beal can kind of hit from 3, but we got enough guys at the 2 and the 3. Let me get a guy that can maybe play, or the 1 and the 2. Let me get a guy that can maybe play the 3. Kevin Porter Jr. kind of as a potential pick. Then the Pelicans, I just was like, they need somebody that can hit from the outside. They need somebody. And then the T-Wolves like defense. Magic, I really like Rui Hachimura, so that played into it. Romeo Langford is definitely going to be an interesting one because, like you had mentioned before, we both had him in the top 5. And this was not beginning of the year before they played some games. This was after they played a few games. It's like, wow, you know, you really like what you see from Romeo. I mean, 19 against Chicago State. We knew up front he never had a 3-point shot, but at that point, it was, can he develop one? And since that point, his best game was Maryland, where he went 3 of 6. Besides that, 2 of 5. Other than that, 1 of 4, 1 of 5, 1 of 3, 1 of 4, 1 of 2, and a bunch of offers. So for me, that is the biggest crux in his game, the 3-point shot, and why I would pass on him compared to other players if I was somebody in the NBA making those decisions.
He's shooting 22%, 22.7% from 3. That's not getting it done for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That is not exciting for anyone. So it's going to be big when scouts are going in and looking at him and watching him play. They're doing it now, but they're going to want to see, especially a scout from the same team that showed up at the beginning of the season and one that showed up at the end of the season. They want to be able to see that he is improved. I don't know if they're going to see that.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that I look to is, and Dave and I mentioned this, I can't remember if it was on the big board or not, but we kind of mentioned it a little bit with Romeo, and I feel like because someone's going to bring it up, there is, you say 22% from 3, and that kind of jars me because, like, in the NBA, there are players that shoot that poorly from 3. His name right now, the one that I'm thinking of, is on the San Antonio Spurs, used to be a Toronto Rocket, DeMar DeRozan, where you can be a name in the league, a all-star type of name, and have that percentage from 3. But I also look at it, and right now, wow, I look at it, and like career-wise for DeMar DeRozan at 28% from 3, do you want to take a guess at how much lower his 3 has gotten this year, and it just blows my mind? What would you say if one of your star players, any basketball team, college or pro, was shooting 17.5% from beyond the arc? 17.5. Now, I know DeMar DeRozan only jacks up, and that's the thing. He only jacks up 1 attempt from 3 a game. Well, Romeo's not doing that. And that's the double-edged sword of, how do you practice? You got to take 3s in the game, but how much of that also needs to be done in the gym before, after practice, on your own game? And that's why I also wonder, the point I made earlier of how many guys are we going to look at, or how are we going to look at Romeo, where I said we might look back and say, oh, he'd be different. Because, like, I look at the draft class that DeMar DeRozan was in, Blake Griffin developing a 3 right now. You look at James Harden, is very inconsistent from 3, but these are guys that are superstar caliber. DeMar DeRozan never did that, and then just a little guy at number 7 that everyone doesn't know, Steph Curry. I don't think anyone has heard his name before and his 3-point shot. But with Romeo, it's going to be interesting. How far does he fall? I don't think he'll fall out of the lottery. He'll be a top 15 pick. But to me, it's going to be interesting before the beginning of the year, we had him top 5. Now I feel like as the season goes on, we're going to kind of be like, is he top 10 or not? Is he in the top 10, out of the top 10? And we'll see what that's like going forward. Do you have any final thoughts that you think we haven't brought up with Romeo Langford?
No.
I just noticed you're wearing very USC colors today. Little Kevin Porter Jr. Kevin Porter Jr. would really like your shirt today because it's got that nice Trojan red and yellow with it. It just popped into my head as I saw the red and yellow on your shirt. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. What do you think about Romeo Langford? If you're a Romeo supporter, here's the true question I want. If you're a Romeo supporter, first off, why? Second off, give me something. Like, I want to have a conversation with you guys because I'm not a hater, but I'm on the other side with Romeo where I'm lower than him. If you're lower on him, again, tell me why, and let's have a conversation down below in that comment section because I think this is an interesting one. You either love him, you hate him, you're high, you're low. There's no one really in the middle on Romeo Langford. Also, at the end of the podcast, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluedpodcast. I want to thank Matt again for joining us on this edition. It was a great topic, a great conversation that we had with him. Also, make sure to check out mostvaluablepodcast.com where you can catch MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, go and rate and review the podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. It really means the world to us. I believe we're at a 4.5 average rating right now. Kind of want to bump that up. It's close to 5 as we can get. I want to thank you guys for watching on YouTube. I know you're looking at our logo right now, but I didn't want to turn on the camera as we're just doing the outro here at the end. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening on podcast services around the world. And as always, have a good day, everybody.